The candlelight at Osteria usually made me feel warm, nostalgic. Tonight, it just illuminated the cold dread icing over my heart. We were here, at the scene of our first date, supposedly celebrating 2 years, but something was off, terribly off, and it was glinting on Sarah's wrist, an unfamiliar gold bracelet. It caught the light with every gesture she made, each flicker a tiny stab in my gut. It wasn't delicate, not something I would have picked for her. It was substantial, and it wasn't mine. Sarah was mid-sentence, her voice a pleasant, oblivious hum in the background, something about the floral arrangements at a wedding venue she'd scouted. And the hydrangeas would be perfect for a summer wedding. Don't you think, Leo? I couldn't nod, I couldn't smile. The words lodged in my throat, thick and bitter. The bracelet. I managed, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Where did you get that? She stopped, her hand instinctively flying to her wrist, fingers tracing the foreign gold. A beat of silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable, before she forced a laugh. Oh, this. Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away again. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. Mark gave it to me for helping with his promotion presentation. Sweet, right? Mark. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mark, her coworker. Mark, who had started as a fleeting mention, an annoying colleague, then morphed into a mentor, a confidant. Mark, who I suddenly realized with sickening clarity, had been the recipient of those late-night texts. Sarah angled her phone away from me, the reason for those urgent deadlines that kept her at the office well past dark. My mind flashed to last weekend, bumping into him at that little coffee shop near her office. He'd been overly familiar, a hand lingering a fraction too long on Sarah's arm. She'd brushed it off, said he was just like that with everyone. I'd wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. Back in Osteria, the clatter of cutlery from other tables seemed deafening. Sarah had resumed talking about the wedding, her voice a little too bright, a little too fast. She was fidgeting with the bracelet, twisting it around her wrist, the gold catching the light over and over. I watched her, a cold knot tightening in my chest. It wasn't just a bracelet. It was a symbol, a declaration, and it wasn't for me. Leo, Sarah's voice, laced with a tentative concern that felt like another betrayal. You've gone all quiet. What's wrong? I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman I'd asked to marry me, the woman I'd built my future around. And in that moment, a terrible, cold certainty settled over me. Take it off, Sarah. Her eyes widened. What? The bracelet. I said, my voice low, intense. Take it off. A flicker of defiance crossed her face. Don't be ridiculous, Leo. It's just a gift. I'm not going to be controlled by you. Controlled. The word was a bitter laugh in my throat. You're wearing another man's jewelry to our anniversary dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date. How do you think that makes me feel? Our voices were hushed, a venomous whisper argument under the romantic lighting. She got defensive, as I knew she would. You're being jealous, insecure. It's just a thank you present. You're blowing this way out of proportion. But I wasn't. It wasn't just the bracelet. It was the late nights, the secretive texts, the way she lit up when she talked about him, a way she hadn't lit up for me in months. It was the slow, creeping distance that had wormed its way between us, leaving a chill where warmth used to be. I didn't shout. I didn't cause a scene. A strange calm had descended over me, the kind that comes after the storm has already broken and all that's left is the wreckage. I reached across the table, my hand steady, and gently took her left hand. Her eyes, wide and confused, met mine. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I slid the engagement ring, the diamond I'd painstakingly chosen, the symbol of our promised future, off her finger. A shocked silence fell between us, heavier than any words. Sarah stared at her bare finger, then at me, her mouth slightly agape. The bracelet on her other wrist seemed to gleam brighter now, a triumphant, mocking sparkle. I put the ring in my pocket. The weight of it felt enormous, a tiny piece of metal holding the collapsed ruins of our life together. Leo, she started, her voice a choked whisper, but I couldn't hear it. I couldn't stay. I stood up, the legs of my chair scraping softly against the polished floor, and I walked out. I walked out of Osteria, out of our anniversary dinner, out of the future we were supposed to have, leaving Sarah sitting there, her name a faint, desperate echo behind me. The city air was cool against my hot face, but it did nothing to clear the roaring in my ears. I walked aimlessly at first, the streetlights blurring through a haze of unshed tears. Each step was a painful beat, thudding in time with the memories flooding back, a relentless tide of what was and what would never be. Osteria. 2 years ago. It felt like a lifetime. I'd been dining alone, a rare quiet evening for myself. Sarah, too, was alone, a reservation mix-up seating us at adjacent, awkwardly close tables. I remember the nervous laugh she'd given when our eyes met, the way she'd tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Looks like we're in voluntary dinner dates," she'd said, and the ice was broken. Conversation flowed as easily as the wine that night, a surprising, exhilarating connection that left me buzzing long after we'd said goodbye. The romance that followed was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to little coastal towns, picnics in the park that stretched into sunset, laughing until our sides ached. We met each other's families, a seamless integration into each other's worlds. Her parents adored me. Mine thought she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Moving in together after 10 months felt like the most natural thing in the world, our lives slotting together like perfectly matched puzzle pieces. The proposal, 6 months ago. I'd planned it for weeks. A rooftop at sunset, fairy lights twinkling, our closest friends and family hidden, waiting to celebrate. I remember the look on her face when I got down on one knee, the tears in her eyes as she whispered yes. The pure, unadulterated joy of that moment felt so real, so unbreakable. How could it have crumbled so fast? But it hadn't been fast, had it? The changes had been subtle, insidious. Sarah's new job 8 months ago, at that prestigious marketing firm. At first, I was so proud. Longer hours, new colleagues, a new level of ambition I hadn't seen in her before. Mark's name started cropping up. Initially, he was just this guy at work, often with an eye roll, an anecdote about his demanding nature. Then gradually, the tone shifted. He became Mark, who's actually really smart. Then, Mark, who's been a great mentor. The distance. It wasn't a sudden chasm, but a slow creeping. Less physical intimacy, fewer shared jokes, conversations that skimmed the surface, never daring to go deeper. We started spending more evenings apart, her at work events. Me just waiting. I tried to talk about it, to bridge the gap, but she'd always dismissed my concerns. "Work is just crazy right now, babe," she'd say. "It'll calm down." It never did. My feet, acting on some unconscious autopilot, had carried me across town. I looked up, surprised to find myself standing in front of my brother, David's apartment building. The city noise faded, replaced by the internal battle raging within me. My gut screamed, "It's over," but my heart, that stubborn, foolish organ, still fixed it. "You can fix this." I needed perspective. I needed David. He'd always been my rock, the one person who could cut through my bullshit and tell me the unvarnished truth. I buzzed his apartment, my hand surprisingly steady. The ring in my pocket felt like a lead weight. The intercom crackled to life. "Yeah. David, it's me." A pause, then the click of the door unlocking. David was waiting at his open apartment door when I stepped out of the elevator. His easygoing smile faltered, replaced by immediate concern as he took in my disheveled appearance, the raw emotion I knew must be stamped on my face, and the way I was clutching something in my pocket, as if it were both precious and poisonous. He didn't need to ask. He knew. David's apartment was a familiar comfort, a calm port in the storm raging inside me. He didn't press, just made me a strong coffee, and sat listening patiently as the whole sorry tale of the evening spilled out of me. The bracelet, Mark, the fight, the ring. My voice was raw, shaking at times, but I got it all out, the words tumbling over each other in their haste to escape the confines of my chest. When I finally fell silent, staring into the depths of my coffee cup, David leaned forward, his expression serious. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and measured. "So, the bracelet. Have you seen any other concrete evidence? Anything that proves she's actually cheating, not just being thoughtless?" I shook my head, a fresh wave of frustration washing over me. "No, not proof. No hotel receipts or love letters, if that's what you mean. But it's a pattern, David. The late nights have been going on for months. She guards her phone like it's Fort Knox. That weird encounter with Mark at the coffee shop, he was practically undressing her with his eyes. And tonight, the way she defended him, The way she refused to take off that damn bracelet. It's not just one thing, it's everything. David nodded slowly, absorbing it all. I get it, man. It sounds shitty, really shitty. But are you sure you're not jumping to conclusions? Maybe it is just a thank you gift, a very inappropriate, expensive thank you gift, but still. Maybe you should talk to her again when you've both calmed down. Hear her out properly. Easy for him to say. He hadn't seen the look in her eyes, the defiant tilt of her chin. As if on cue, my phone, which I'd tossed onto his coffee table, started buzzing relentlessly. Sarah. Text after text, call after call. I ignored them, the shrill sound grating on my already frayed nerves. Aren't you going to answer that? David asked, gesturing towards the vibrating phone. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. Instead, I started reading the texts aloud, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. The initial messages were angry, accusatory. How could you just walk out like that, Leo? Then a shift to concern. Are you okay? Where did you go? I'm worried. And finally, pleading. Please, Leo, talk to me. We can fix this, I know we can. The last text, sent just moments ago, made my stomach clench. I'm coming to David's. I know that's where you are. We need to talk. Panic seized me. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to face her, to see that bracelet again, to hear more excuses, more justifications. Shit, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. She's coming here. David raised an eyebrow. Want me to make myself scarce? Give you guys some privacy? No, I said a little too quickly. No, stay, please. I don't think I can do this alone. The thought of confronting her again without David as a buffer was overwhelming. The weight was tense, each tick of the clock amplifying the dread coiling in my stomach. Finally, the doorbell rang, a sharp, jarring sound in the otherwise quiet apartment. David exchanged a look with me, then went to answer it. Sarah stood in the doorway, her face pale, her mascara smudged from crying. And there it was, still on her wrist, glinting under the hallway light, the gold bracelet. It felt like a deliberate provocation, a defiant statement. The confrontation in David's living room was even more brutal than the one in the restaurant. Sarah insisted the bracelet was meaningless, just an innocent thank you gift from a grateful colleague. Her words sounded hollow, rehearsed. I cut through the bullshit. Are you sleeping with him, Sarah? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Her denial was swift, too swift. No, of course not. How can you even ask me that? But her eyes wouldn't meet mine. They darted around the room, everywhere but at me. This time, I didn't hold back. I laid it all out. The late nights, the guarded phone, the increasing mentions of Mark, the emotional distance, the way she'd seemed to withdraw from me piece by piece. I detailed every suspicion, every hurt, every doubt that had been festering inside me for months. As I spoke, her composure began to crumble. The defiance in her eyes was replaced by a raw, painful vulnerability. Tears streamed down her face, unchecked. And then, the admission. Not the one I was expecting, but somehow even more devastating. Okay, fine, she sobbed, her voice cracking. No, I haven't slept with him, I swear. But there's an emotional connection. He listens to me, Leo. He gets me. He understands me in ways you don't even try to anymore. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He understands me in ways you don't even try to anymore. Emotional infidelity. It was a betrayal just as profound, just as painful as any physical affair. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The realization that she'd sought solace, understanding, connection with another man because she felt she couldn't find it with me. That was a knife to the heart. The fight, the anger, drained out of me, leaving behind a vast, aching emptiness. I looked at Sarah, at the woman I loved, the woman who was now a stranger to me, her face streaked with tears, the offending bracelet a stark reminder of her betrayal. I need you to leave, Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need time. Time to think. She opened her mouth to protest, to plead, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. I couldn't hear anymore, not tonight. Defeated, she nodded, tears still flowing. She turned and walked out of David's apartment, out of my life, leaving me standing there, the ghost of her words echoing in the sudden, crushing silence. He understands me. The silence was a cold, unwelcome companion. The next morning, I woke up on David's couch with a throbbing headache and a heart that felt like a lead weight in my chest. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was the engagement ring, sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it. It sparkled, a cruel mockery of the shattered dreams it represented. The cheap, imitation wood of the table seemed to highlight the ring's inherent value, a value that now felt meaningless. I stared at it, the facets catching the weak morning light filtering through the blinds, each glint a tiny pinprick of pain. I called in sick to work. The thought of putting on a brave face, of pretending that my world hadn't just imploded, was unbearable. Normal life felt like a distant, unattainable planet. David, bless his soul, was already up, making breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon a small, comforting anchor in the sea of my misery. He didn't say much, just placed a plate piled high with food in front of me and sat down with his own. We ate in a companionable silence for a while. Then he cleared his throat. So, he began, his tone gentle but firm. Last night was a lot. But I gotta ask, Leo, and be honest with yourself here. Have you been as present in the relationship as you could be? His question, so direct, so unsparing, caught me off guard. It was easier to paint Sarah as the villain, the sole architect of our demise. But David was playing devil's advocate, forcing me to look at my own role in the slow, painful unraveling of our love story. My mind reeled back, sifting through the months, the years, my workaholic tendencies, the endless pursuit of that next promotion, the long hours I justified as building our future. Had I, in my relentless focus on providing, forgotten to just be there? Had I taken Sarah for granted, assumed our foundation was unshakable, a bedrock I didn't need to tend to? The uncomfortable truth began to dawn. I'd been so focused on the destination that I'd neglected the journey, and in doing so, I'd neglected her. Emotional affairs, David said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. They often happen when someone feels unseen, unheard, when they're not getting what they need from their partner. His words weren't an accusation, but a simple statement of fact, and they resonated with a painful clarity. The anger that had been simmering inside me began to cool, replaced by a profound, aching sadness. This wasn't just Sarah's betrayal. This was a shared failure, a mutual neglect that had allowed weeds to grow in the garden of our relationship, choking the life out of it. We were both responsible for the distance that had grown between us. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. A single unread email from Sarah. I'd been ignoring her calls and texts, but this felt different. I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was long, a rambling, heartfelt outpouring of her perspective. She wrote about feeling unappreciated, like she was just a fixture in my life, a comfortable habit rather than a cherished partner. She described the thrill of Mark's attention, the excitement of someone new finding her interesting, valuable, seeing her in a way she felt I no longer did. The words were a painful mirror, reflecting my own shortcomings back at me. She insisted again that nothing physical had happened with Mark, that she'd been foolish, reckless, but that she wanted to fix things with us, with me. But then, the kicker, the admission that twisted the knife even further. She was confused about what she wanted, about who she wanted. She loved me, she wrote, but she also had these feelings for him. I put the phone down, the screen going dark, my reflection staring back at me, a hollow-eyed stranger. The complexity of the situation was overwhelming. This wasn't a simple case of black and white, of good versus evil. This was a messy, complicated tangle of emotions, of unmet needs, of mistakes made on both sides. The path forward was shrouded in fog. Could we rebuild from this? Could I ever truly trust her again? Could she ever truly recommit to me, to us, with this other man, this other life still lurking in the shadows of her heart? I didn't have the answers, not yet. But one thing was clear. I needed to take a step back, to really dig deep and figure out what I truly wanted, what I was willing to fight for, and what I was willing to let go. The ring on the coffee table seemed to pulse with a silent, insistent question. The future, once so clear, so bright, was now a terrifying, uncertain void, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to fill it with her. The days that followed were a blur of hollow routine and quiet desperation. I moved back to our apartment, a place now haunted by ghosts of laughter and shared dreams. Sarah, by mutual unspoken agreement, stayed with her sister, Chloe. The silence in the apartment was deafening, amplifying the turmoil in my head. We exchanged a few terse, functional texts, logistics about bills, whose turn it was to water the plants. But the chasm between us felt wider than ever. I tried to find solace in work, throwing myself into projects with a desperate intensity, but even that couldn't numb the persistent ache in my chest. One evening, while attempting to organize the chaotic mess that was my home office, a task I'd been putting off for months, I stumbled upon it. Tucked away in the back of Sarah's desk drawer, hidden beneath a pile of old notebooks and stationery, was a small, elegant receipt from a high-end jeweler I didn't recognize. My blood ran cold. It was for a gold bracelet. The price listed made my stomach lurch. It was far, far more expensive than a casual thank you gift. This wasn't a token of appreciation. This was a grand gesture. A new wave of nausea washed over me. This discovery changed everything. The carefully constructed narrative Sarah had woven, the innocent gift, the emotional but not physical connection, began to fray at the edges. My mind, already a battleground of conflicting emotions, now fixated on a new, terrifying possibility. Had she lied about more than just the cost? I found myself standing in front of her laptop, a sleek silver machine that suddenly felt like a Pandora's box of forbidden knowledge. I'd never considered crossing this line before. Trust and privacy had always been sacrosanct in our relationship. But the receipt, the price, it gnawed at me, fueling a desperate need for the truth, no matter how ugly. My hand hovered over the trackpad, my reflection, a pale, grim-faced stranger, staring back from the dark screen. With a deep breath, I clicked it open. She hadn't even bothered to log out. The email exchanges with Mark were there, easily found. I scrolled through them, my heart pounding, a sick feeling churning in my stomach. They confirmed the emotional intimacy Sarah had confessed to, shared jokes, late-night confessions, a level of familiarity that made me deeply uncomfortable. But they were ambiguous, carefully worded, nothing overtly sexual, nothing that definitively proved a physical affair. Frustration warred with a strange, twisted sense of relief. Then I remembered our shared cloud backup. We'd set it up ages ago, a safety net for photos and important documents. And text messages. My fingers flew across the keyboard. There, in a folder I hadn't looked at in years, were archives of deleted text message chains. My breath hitched. The texts between Sarah and Mark were far more explicit than their emails. Flirtatious banter escalated into suggestive comments, thinly veiled invitations. And then the damning evidence. A scheduled meeting, not at the office, not for coffee, but after work hours at a hotel bar, the Regent, a place known for its discreet, upscale clientele. My hands were shaking as I read and reread the messages, the casual, intimate tone a stark contrast to the formal, almost cold way Sarah and I had been communicating for months. The urge to confront Mark directly, to unleash the torrent of anger and betrayal churning inside me, was almost overwhelming. I imagined storming into his office, or better yet, that hotel bar. And in what? What would that achieve? A messy public scene? A fleeting moment of satisfaction, followed by an even deeper sense of emptiness. No, there had to be a better way, a calmer way. I thought of Chloe, Sarah's older sister. Chloe had always been straight with me, a no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is kind of woman. We'd always had a good relationship, a mutual respect. If anyone knew the truth, the whole truth, it would be Chloe. The conversation was as uncomfortable as I'd anticipated. I found her at her small, sunny apartment, the scent of freshly baked cookies a stark contrast to the bitter taste in my mouth hanging in the air. She listened patiently as I laid out my discoveries, the receipt, the emails, the damning texts. Her expression was a mixture of sympathy and a weary resignation that told me she already knew more than she was letting on. "She's confused, Leo," Chloe said finally, her voice soft, her eyes filled with a sad understanding. "She really is. She loves you, I know she does. But she's attracted to him. He's new, he's exciting, he makes her feel seen, I guess." Then the words I'd been dreading, the confirmation that sealed the coffin on my dying hopes, she told me. She told me they kissed once, after a work event a few weeks ago. She said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But Chloe trailed off, her gaze apologetic. A mistake. One kiss. But it wasn't just a kiss, was it? It was a betrayal, a physical line crossed. Sarah's carefully constructed denials, her protestations of an innocent emotional connection, crumbled into dust. The devastation was absolute, a crushing weight that stole the air from my lungs. I mumbled my thanks to Chloe, my voice hollow, and stumbled out of her apartment, the scent of cookies now cloying, sickening. I sat in my car, the engine off, the silence pressing in on me. The city sounds outside, traffic, distant sirens, laughter from a nearby park, seemed to belong to another world, a world I was no longer a part of. My hand, seemingly of its own accord, reached for my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over one mom. My emotional anchor, the one person whose wisdom and unconditional love had always guided me through the darkest storms. Her voice when she answered was warm, familiar, a comforting balm on my raw, bleeding heart. I didn't have to say much. She heard it in my voice, the unspoken pain, the shattering of my world. And her words, when they came, were simple yet profound. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with a mother's sorrow. "Sometimes, Leo, sometimes love just isn't enough. Not if the trust is broken. You can't build a life on a foundation of lies." Her words resonated deep within me, a painful, undeniable truth. Trust. It was the bedrock of any relationship, the invisible thread that held two lives together. And ours? Ours was irrevocably broken. A week. 7 days since the world as I knew it had fractured at Osteria. I'd moved in temporarily with David. The quiet hum of his bachelor pad a strange counterpoint to the chaos in my head. Our apartment, my apartment now, I guess, felt too large, too empty, each room echoing with Sarah's absence and the phantom presence of her betrayal. Sarah had been texting daily, short, pleading messages. "Can we please talk, Leo? I miss you. Don't do this to us." I'd ignored most of them, the words feeling like tiny, insistent barbs. But the silence couldn't last forever. We had a life to untangle, a future, however broken, to address. I finally agreed to meet, suggesting a neutral location, a park near the river, a place where we used to take long walks on lazy Sunday afternoons, a place that held memories of happier, simpler times. Perhaps a foolish choice in retrospect. Before the meeting, I called Emily, my oldest friend, my confidant since kindergarten, the one person who could always offer a clear, unvarnished female perspective. I laid it all out for her. The bracelet, the emotional affair, the kiss, the lies. She listened, her silence on the other end of the line a testament to the gravity of the situation. "Leo," she said finally, her voice firm but kind. "This is a mess, a total, unadulterated mess. But there's one thing you need to look for, one thing that will tell you everything you need to know." "What's that?" I asked, desperate for some kind of clarity, some signpost in this emotional wilderness. "The bracelet," she said. "If she's still wearing that damn bracelet, she's not ready to let him go. It's a symbol, Leo, whether she admits it or not. It's a connection to him. If she truly wants to fix things with you, that bracelet needs to be gone." Her words hung in the air, a stark, simple truth. The bracelet. It all came down to the damn bracelet. I arrived at the park a few minutes early, my stomach a knot of anxiety. Sarah was already there, sitting on our usual bench, the one overlooking the river. She looked small, fragile, her shoulders slumped, her eyes red-rimmed. And then I saw it, gleaming on her wrist, catching the weak afternoon sun, the gold bracelet. My heart sank. Emily was right. The conversation that followed was tense, honest, excruciatingly painful. Sarah admitted everything, the full extent of her feelings for Mark, the depth of her confusion. She cried. She apologized. She pleaded for another chance. She wanted to work on our relationship, she said, to rebuild what we'd lost. But then the caveat. She couldn't promise that her feelings for Mark would just disappear overnight. She needed time, she said, to sort through her emotions. "Why are you still wearing it, Sarah?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the anger that had consumed me for days, just a weary, defeated calm. I gestured towards the bracelet, the offending piece of gold that had become the symbol of our undoing. Her response, when it came, was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. She looked down at the bracelet, her fingers tracing its intricate design. "Because," She hesitated, then looked up at me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of defiance and sadness. Because it reminds me that I'm more than just someone's fiancé. It reminds me that I'm still desirable, that I'm still me. Her words, meant perhaps to explain her internal struggle, clarified everything for me. She wasn't ready for marriage. She wasn't ready for the commitment, the partnership, the us that I had envisioned. She was still searching for something outside of our relationship, something she felt I couldn't give her. I deserve someone who is fully committed to me, Sarah, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Someone who doesn't need a reminder from another man that she's desirable. Someone who sees me, who chooses us without reservation, without confusion. A painful moment of mutual recognition passed between us. We wanted different things, or perhaps we had become different people, our paths diverging, leading us away from the shared future we had once so confidently planned. I won't be your backup plan, Sarah, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I won't wait around while you figure out your feelings. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to either of us. And so the decision was made, the final, irrevocable end to our engagement. The words were spoken, quiet and devastating, under the pale afternoon sky, the river flowing indifferently beside us. As we parted, I reached into my pocket and took out the engagement ring. Her eyes widened, a flicker of hope quickly extinguished in their depths. I pressed it into her palm, her fingers closing around it reflexively. Sell it, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Consider it closure for both of us. Walking away from her, from the park, from the life we were supposed to have, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest, and yet, beneath the devastation, there was a strange, unexpected sense of relief. A sense of finality. A sense of freedom. The aftermath. That evening, back at David's apartment, I opened my laptop. I navigated to the shared drive, to the meticulously organized wedding planning folder we'd created together. Venues, guest lists, caterers, honeymoon destinations, a whole lifetime of dreams neatly filed away. With a deep breath and a hand that trembled only slightly, I right-clicked and selected delete. The digital remnants of our future gone in an instant. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the park, since the ring, since the official, gut-wrenching end of it all. I'd found a new apartment, a small, sterile place that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings, or maybe just loneliness. Packing up my half of the life Sarah and I had built together was an awkward, painful dance, sifting through shared belongings, deciding who got the good coffee maker, the worn-out armchair we both loved, the framed photo from that trip to Italy. Each item a fresh stab, a reminder of what was lost. The social fallout was swift and messy. Friends took sides, some offering awkward condolences, others disappearing into the ether, uncomfortable with the drama. Changing my relationship status on social media felt like a public declaration of failure, a digital scarlet letter. Returning wedding gifts with their cheerful, optimistic cards was a particularly cruel form of torture. Then came the inevitable run-in. A crowded coffee shop on a Saturday morning. I was waiting for my order, trying to lose myself in the mindless scroll of my phone, when I heard her laugh, that familiar, melodic laugh that used to make my heart skip a beat. I looked up, and there she was, Sarah, and with her, of course, was Mark. They were huddled together at a small table, his arm draped casually over the back of her chair, her hand resting on his. She wasn't wearing the bracelet or the ring. The sight was a gut punch, a visceral confirmation of everything I'd feared, everything I'd known deep down was true. Their relationship hadn't been innocent, my suspicions hadn't been unfounded, and she had moved on quickly, far more quickly than someone truly conflicted, truly heartbroken should have. Unexpected clarity. Later that week, a mutual friend, with a tactlessness that bordered on cruelty, informed me that Sarah and Mark were officially dating. The news hit me harder than I expected, a fresh wave of anger, raw and potent, surging through me. But then, as the anger subsided, something else began to emerge, clarity. A cold, hard, undeniable clarity. I had dodged a bullet. A lifetime with someone who wasn't fully committed, someone who was capable of such profound deception, such casual cruelty. The phone call to Sarah's parents was one of the hardest things I had to do. They had always treated me like a son, welcomed me into their family with open arms. Her mother cried, her voice thick with apology and a genuine sorrow that mirrored my own. Her father, a man of few words, offered gruff, unwavering support. "You're a good man, Leo," he'd said. "You deserve better." His words were a small, unexpected comfort. I started therapy, unpacking the baggage of the breakup, working through the trust issues that had taken root, trying to make sense of the emotional shrapnel. It was slow, painful work, like picking shards of glass out of a wound, but necessary. Unexpected support came from surprising places. Colleagues who had noticed my quiet withdrawal, my forced smiles, reached out with quiet gestures of kindness. Old friends, the ones who had been there before Sarah, rallied around me, dragging me out for drinks, for movies, for anything to distract me from the gaping hole in my life. The physical symptoms of heartbreak were relentless. Sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, a hollow ache in my stomach that stole my appetite, a constant, bone-deep fatigue that no amount of coffee could dispel. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame, a physical manifestation of the emptiness within. David remained my steadfast anchor, a constant source of support and much-needed distraction. He introduced me to new social circles, gently nudging me back into the world of the living, even when all I wanted to do was curl up and disappear. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through Pinterest, a mindless habit I'd picked up. And there it was, Sarah's wedding board, still active, still being added to. New pins for venues, for dresses, for flowers, a different groom, presumably, but the same dream. The site was a cold, final slap in the face. With a decisive click, I unfollowed her, deleted her contact information, severed the last remaining digital ties. The first night in my new apartment, surrounded by a sea of unpacked boxes, the silence was overwhelming. I sat on the floor, the bare walls echoing my loneliness. But as the city lights twinkled outside my window, a new feeling began to surface, faint at first, then stronger: freedom. The terrifying, exhilarating freedom of a blank slate. The empty space on my finger where my own wedding ring would have been was a constant reminder, but it was also a promise of a new beginning. A new beginning. 6 months. Half a year since my life had been upended, reconfigured, set on a new, uncertain course. I was at a wedding, the first I'd attended since my own engagement had imploded. It was for an old college friend, a joyous, sun-drenched affair that should have filled me with warmth. Instead, it was a minefield of awkward encounters and well-meaning but painful questions about Sarah, about our canceled plans. "So, Leo, when are you tying the knot?" I'd plastered on a smile, mumbled something vague about not rushing things, and quickly changed the subject. Then, a familiar face in the crowd, Chloe, Sarah's sister. I hadn't seen her since that awful day at her apartment. She approached me hesitantly, a sympathetic smile on her face. We made small talk for a few minutes, the elephant in the room, Sarah, looming large and unspoken between us. Then Chloe, true to her straightforward nature, cut to the chase. "You heard about Sarah and Mark, right?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, bracing myself. "Yeah, I heard they were together." Chloe let out a short, humorless laugh. "Together, right? Well, were is the operative word. It imploded spectacularly after about 2 months." I blinked, surprised. "Really? What happened?" "Turns out," Chloe said, stirring her drink, "Mark is a bit of a player, a manipulator. He'd pulled the same routine, the mentoring, the understanding, the lavish gifts, on at least 2 other women in the office before Sarah. She was just the latest conquest. He got bored, moved on, left her heartbroken and humiliated." She paused, then added almost as an afterthought, "She tried to contact you, a few times, but she said you'd asked for no communication." I processed this new information, a strange cocktail of emotions swirling within me. There was a tiny, vindictive part of me that felt a grim satisfaction at their relationship's demise, but mostly I just felt tired and a little sad for Sarah, for the mess she'd made of her life, of our life. But there was no flicker of a desire to reconcile, no urge to rush to her side. Too much damage had been done, too much trust had been shattered. Later that evening, I found myself chatting with the bride, a radiant vision in white. She'd heard about Sarah, of course, everyone had. She squeezed my arm, her eyes kind. "Sometimes, Leo," she said softly, "the wrong person leads you to the right one, or at least prepares you for them. Her words, simple yet profound, stuck with me. As the reception wound down, I found myself in an easy, surprisingly enjoyable conversation with a woman I'd been introduced to earlier, Jessica, a friend of the bride. She was witty, intelligent, with a warm, infectious laugh. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, reminding me in a strange way of that first night with Sarah at Osteria. But this felt different, more grounded, less desperate. There was an ease, a lack of pressure that was refreshing. We exchanged numbers, a casual, no expectations gesture that left me feeling lighter than I had in months. A few days later, on a whim, I found myself standing outside Osteria. It was a Tuesday night, quiet, unassuming. I walked in, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over me. I asked for a table for one. The maitre d', the same man who had seated Sarah and me 2 years ago, recognized me. He led me to a familiar table, the one by the window. "Good evening, sir," he said, a polite smile on his face. "Will the, pretty lady be joining you tonight?" I returned his smile, a genuine one this time, free of the bitterness that had clung to me for so long. "No," I said, my voice calm, steady. "Not tonight. We weren't right for each other in the end, but I'm grateful for the time we had." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes, and left me to my thoughts. As I ate, savoring the familiar flavors, I reflected on the journey of the past few months, the pain, the anger, the heartbreak, but also the resilience, the growth, the slow, steady healing. My phone buzzed. A text message. It was from Jessica. "Hey, just checking you got home okay from the wedding the other night. It was lovely to meet you." A small smile touched my lips. I typed out a simple, friendly message. I was open to the possibility of something new, of connection, of laughter, but I was also cautious, my heart still bearing the scars of its recent battles. As I left Osteria later that evening, I paused on the sidewalk, looking back at the warm glow spilling from its windows. A chapter closed, a painful, necessary ending. The engagement ring was long gone, sold as I'd suggested. A final, symbolic act of closure for Sarah, I hoped. But the lessons learned, the strength forged in the fires of heartbreak, those I would carry with me. I turned and walked away from the restaurant, away from the ghosts of the past, and continued forward into the cool, promising darkness of the night. The city lights glittered ahead, a million tiny possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. A new beginning.